For years, Jacques Ellul has warned us repeatedly that our modern addiction to images is a kind of terrorist time bomb, ominously ticking away in the comfortable hotel of free democratic society. The humiliation of the word powerfully and convincingly demonstrates the wholesale abuse of language and this dangerous addiction to images, characteristic of modern society. Public officials are electable in the United States today only if they project an attractive television image. Reaction to presidential debates, for example, depends almost entirely on image, not substance, truth, or coherent rational argument. Similarly, the Church indulges our desire to feel good instead of responding to our need to be spiritually challenged and fed through solid exposition of the Scriptures. The electronic church, in particular, panders to our appetite for entertainment rather than authentic discipleship and maturity. Ellul's response to such incoherent flabbiness is spelled out in his book, and can be summed up in his words: anyone wishing to save humanity today must first of all save the word. Like most of Ellul's themes, his view of the problems of language and image stems from ideas already present in his seminal The Presence of the Kingdom, published in 1948. One of the key problems for modern thinking Christians at that time, in Ellul's view, was the problem of communication, to which he devoted one of the book's chapters. There he confronts his reader with the technically determined choice of facts made available through the mass media, the distortion of language by the media, with which dialogue is impossible, and their tendency to distract and entertain rather than to stimulate reflection. Propaganda has replaced the commonly held ideas made communication between persons possible. The destructive power of films relates in part to language. Ellul's proposed solution to the complex of problems presented in The Presence of the Kingdom is the discovery of a new language. This is the only way understanding can begin to flow again, so that we can communicate the gospel in such a way that it penetrates. In Hope in Time of Abandonment, Ellul devotes a section to the death of the word, in which he examines briefly the phenomenon he calls the disintegration of language. Propaganda, the meaningless multiplication of words, the disassociation of the word from the person speaking it, and society's increasing dependence on images, all contribute to the picture Ellul draws of a world with no solution and no future. These same aspects of the problem of language in our day become major sections of the humiliation of the word. Besides the spirited attacks already mentioned, in this book, Ellul also criticizes icons and images as idols, along with computers, comic strips, slogans, technical efficiency, the death of God theology, and political and liturgical spectacle. Although Ellul himself responds in his last chapter to the potential criticism of this book as sheer negativism, the fundamental positive thrust here should not be overlooked. He has not written an essentially negative book, criticizing the preponderance of images. His basic aim is not to denigrate images, but to liberate language as the fundamental weapon in the last struggle for human freedom. Only as it relates to language does he deal with the problem of images. Ellul deals positively with language, its essence, its value, and its relationship to freedom. In this sense, the humiliation of a word is a continuation of the author's The Ethics of Freedom. We have heedlessly capitulated to the allure of images, and thus language has been dethroned from its proper preeminence in human affairs. Our preference for images has corrupted and distorted language, which has become sound without sense. In a similar manner, Ellul has shown earlier that we have preferred the wrong sort of revolution, given ourselves to the wrong sort of prayer, allowed the idolatrous city to dominate our affections, and substituted facile belief for vital faith. In most of these situations, something good and necessary has been either corrupted or blown up out of proportion, so that it dominates what it should be subject to. Such lack of proportion involves the dialectic between reality and truth, in the case of images and language. Our attention has focused on the tangible to such an extent that we no longer consider truth to carry any serious weight. Reality deals with fixed things not open to discussion, things which one can only observe. It forces us to conform. Truth, like the word, is infinitely open-ended and invites reflection, response, relationship, and dialogue. But reality refuses to allow us the distance necessary so that we can be critical of what we are considering. In modern society, we tend to accept truth only if it bears on reality, specifically scientific reality, which has become our ultimate truth. In the same vein, we tend to believe words only if they have some visual evidence supporting them. Whatever cannot be expressed through images seems to us to have no genuine importance or even existence. Another reason for maintaining that the humiliation of a word is not primarily a negative book is Ellul's repeated effort at synthesis. The dichotomy between word and image and between truth and reality is a temporary effect of the fall and contrary to God's ultimate purpose for humankind. In the incarnation and the consummation of God's kingdom, word and image are reconciled. In what sense is language humiliated, according to Ellul? His title alludes to a book written during 1939 and 1940 by the novelist and polemicist George Bernanos, but not published until 1949, Les Enfants Humiliés. Bernanos deplores the fact that promises made to those involved in World War I were broken, leading to a second conflagration. In Ellul's book, the problem is not broken promises, but rather a broken humanity. He does not attack images in themselves so much as the imperialism of images and our idolatrous prostration before them. For several years, Ellul led public discussions of significant films in his native Bordeaux. Such activity makes it clear that he is not flatly opposed to proper uses of images, but images tend to neutralize the effects of the word, which becomes a sort of optional footnote to the dominant images. In this sense, the word is continually humiliated in our society. Ellul clarifies many other puzzling tendencies in modern society. Until I read The Humiliation of a Word, for instance, I could not understand why my students in French literature classes had so much to say and ask about the texts they read, but never had any verbal response whatever when I showed them a film. Language is further humiliated by intellectuals, especially certain structuralists whose attacks on language that communicates meaning and whose preference for the pure language of the insane appear to have triggered the writing of this book by Ellul. Most of us now think essentially by association of images, Ellul believes, and can no longer construct or follow a rigorous logical demonstration unless this is supported by charts and diagrams. As schools increase their reliance on images, educational levels decrease, indicating that images are not the panacea we presume them to be. In theological terms, God's choice of language as the basis of his contact with humanity signifies that we are free to respond or to ignore him if we choose. Reliance on images eliminates the freedom that is essential to us if we are to respond to God. Ellul returns repeatedly to the theme of language as our human distinctive. Language is what makes us human. If we use it thoughtlessly or devalue it in any way, we also devaluate God, who chose it for his communication with us and ourselves. We become less human when we opt for images rather than the word.